Hello. Our story begins inside the tunnels leading towards the Geonosian Arena. Anakin and Padme were sharing a moment before going out to what would likely be their deaths. Thousands of beings have been put into arenas like this across the stars, but very little had survived them. Anakin and Padme were put together because they arrived together. The very grumpy Obi-Wan Kenobi was already tied to a pole, waiting for some gigantic monsters to approach them and try to eat them. The three captors weren't fully aware of the reinforcements to come, but the Jedi were infiltrating the planet as they spoke. Master of the Order, Mace Windu, was able to gather a task force of 200 Jedi for this assault. He was currently looking for Dooku's perch. The Jedi, per Windu's instruction, were to stay away from the Geonosians, to remain as quiet as possible. Master Mundi and Plo were leading a counter-assault to a droid control console, so that once the battle did start, the droids could be shut down like they were on Naboo a decade before. The whole operation here was to ensure Dooku's capture, end the political squabbling between the Republic and Separatist movement, as well as display Republic power with the clone army. To the Jedi present on this planet, this was simply an exercise. Plus, they were also saving the very influential senator from Naboo who had just missed the very important Military Creation Act on Coruscant. The Jedi dispersed into the Geonosian Arena, spreading out so that their presence could be felt once they revealed themselves. Mace's search for Dooku's perch was taking quite long, and he wasn't trying to let the Count go too far with this attempted execution of the Senator or the Jedi. He continued moving through catwalks and corridors, and as he crossed yet another catwalk, he descended lower, which wasn't per his choice. He couldn't turn back because it wouldn't get him anywhere any faster. Just as Mace stopped at the bottom of the steps, he saw Anakin and Padme on the top of a transport, being carried towards the arena. Mace peered his head around the corner to check and make sure the coast was clear. As he did that, he wheeled back to see Anakin and Padme lean in to kiss each other. It was clear as day to Windu. Like the silhouettes made what he saw even more recognizable. There was absolutely no misinterpretation of what he had seen, because these MFers were kissing. Mace couldn't believe his eyes, but there was something else. A frustration. Not a jealousy or anger at Anakin, but an internal frustration. One of confirmation. Earlier, before Obi-Wan left for Kamino, he confronted Windu about his concerns over Anakin's mission to Naboo. He spoke of Skywalker's emotional connection to Padme, one that had been present since he was a boy. In this deleted scene, Windu informed Obi-Wan to have faith that Anakin would make the right choice, and it was here where that faith was proven misplaced. Mace bit his lip and squeezed into another corridor as he continued searching for Dooku's location. The Jedi Master of the Order wasn't frustrated at Skywalker per se. He was actually more so irritated with the will of the Council, though he couldn't determine why. Mace felt one of two ways, and yet he couldn't identify which, and this came from another conflict at the moment. Windu knew that there was a legitimate chance that he might have to kill his former friend, Dooku, which he didn't want to do, but that singular internal quarrel disrupted his thoughts surrounding Anakin's actions and the Council's decisions 10 years beforehand. Because, realistically looking at it, the Council's initial decision was correctly made, that the code was proper for suggesting that younglings shouldn't be accepted past the age of 3, because they wouldn't be able to emotionally conform to their ways. However, it was in that line of thought that Mace saw fallacies with the Council's decision, because even in their acceptance of Skywalker into their ranks, something more should have been done. Thus, this frustration or irritation came back on his shoulders just as much as it did the other counselors that stood with him in their decisions made a decade before. Mace realized that it was the failure of the Council to both accept Anakin into their ranks and not provide him with an adequate teacher once they did. Though he was unsure of which one he was more frustrated with, he did assertively know that he was upset with himself for not having spoken up. Windu let these thoughts plague his mind as he eventually closed in on the perch. By the time he arrived, Dooku was surrounded by two figureheads of the Trade Federation, Pago the Lesser, Jango Fett, and his son Boba. Mace wasn't really concerned with anyone else aside from Dooku, so as he stepped closer to the light at the end of the tunnel, he considered doing the unthinkable. Because he had to be honest with himself. There was a darkness surrounding all of this. Dooku had aligned himself with the Federation, a group that had no regard for human life, and a group whose leader had freed himself from the courts numerous times. They wouldn't stop now, and he needed to act against them. Mace's hand hovered over his lightsaber, feeling the metal of the blade within his hand, and he pulled the lightsaber gently off the hilt. He stepped towards the edge of the corridor, and he felt the heat of the desert planet consume his body. Windu's finger touched the ignition, and without holding back, he stepped directly into the path of danger, opening his back up to Jango and plunging his saber into Dooku's back. The strike would kill him, but before it did, Mace grabbed a hold of his friend and pulled him. Jango grabbed his son, pushing him behind his body as he watched Mace protect himself with Dooku's growingly limp body. Everyone was confused, even the Master of the Order. It wasn't until he fell back that Dooku realized who had done this to him. He wanted to be angry or even upset, but truthfully, he couldn't believe that after all these years, his friend finally did the right thing. It was just to the wrong person. He told Windu those exact words before he died in his former friend's arms. The battle within the arena hadn't started yet, but the Jedi were beginning to reveal themselves to the crown so that they could stop the droids from killing Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Padme in the middle of the arena. Jango Fett looked at Dooku's lifeless corpse, and then to Boba, telling his son that it was time to go, as he planted his helmet onto his head and pushed Boba into the corridor Mace just came from. If Dooku was dead, then there was no one to pay him, so he wasn't going to risk his son's life with Windu right there. Better to just move along and keep making his way in the galaxy. The Trade Federation duo and Poggle the Lesser stood perplexed, and as Poggle tried to fly away, Mace pulled the Geonosian out of the sky and into the ground. Mace slipped out from behind Dooku's body and pressed his lightsaber forward, telling the two Kata Nemodians and Poggle to sit still. They looked at Mace in horror, but before he could say another word to them, 4 B-2 battle droids started marching down the hallway Mace just came from. Windu blocked the shots from the droids, and just as the arena started to descend into absolute chaos, the Jedi Master expertly worked the droids, and just as he started marching towards them, a body flew up from behind him. A thud could be heard, and Mace saw from the corner of his eyes Coleman Trevor, igniting his emerald lightsaber. Mace knew that his fellow counselor would make sure the trio didn't escape. Mace's saber swung and blocked each blaster bolt flung his way. He closed in on the droids, cutting each of them down. He used the force to disperse the shredded pieces and turn to Coleman. Windu rushed back and told his ally to gather a couple knights and escort the Separatist allies to a Jedi shuttle, so that they could escape the planet with evidence of collusion between the Federation and the Separatist movement. In theory, cutting off the head of the snake should slow down the push towards war. The rest of the incoming Battle of Geonosis would go relatively similarly. Due to Dooku's death, the Jedi would actively move into the empty stands, instead of trapping themselves within the arena, allowing them the chance to save more of their members, while also remaining alive for the reinforcements delivered by the clone army and Master Yoda. When the clones did arrive, the assault on the industrial planet began. The fight, again, going similarly and coming to a conclusion with a much different resolve. 2 of the most influential members of the Separatist Council had been captured, while the Death Star plans designed by the Geonosians was wiped from their hard drive, the blueprints being completely destroyed in the process. The Jedi capture of Newt Gunray and Poggle the Lesser would be instrumental in changing the after effects of the Battle of Geonosis. Though on the more personal side of things, Mace, after having endured the struggle of killing his former best friend, and of course the battle, had to decide on what to do regarding what he saw. Attachment was forbidden, romantic attachment even more so, though what became evident within Mace's mind were the different frustrations he was developing towards the Council and their handling of Anakin's training. This also did pertain to frustrations at himself, for having not seen the signs. The weight of Dooku's death sat on his shoulders. It was the right thing to do, but he was unsure if it made him a bad Jedi. He killed someone in cold blood, in hopes that it could resolve something that had not been written yet. So following their return to Coruscant, the memorialization of the fallen 78 Jedi Knights on Geonosis, and the stalling of the Clone War in the Senate, Mace confronted the Grand Master. Due to the capture of Gunray and the death of Dooku, the Separatist movement slammed to a halt. Their leadership was dead, and now the government Dooku built was questioning the involvement of these conglomerates. Side note, the CIS was meant to be a system that directly opposed Republic interests and habits of governing. But if the Confederate movement was utilizing the conglomerates that had representation within the Republic Senate, then what was the purpose of their new government? This had just proved that Dooku had lied to them, and the war criminal that was Newt Gunray was responsible for not just the blockade of Naboo, but pushing the Confederacy towards rebellion, towards war. It was all much that would develop in the coming days. For Mace Windu, though, he stepped lightly into Yoda's quarters, where the Grand Master asked that he sit. Yoda noted Mace's behavior following the battle. It wasn't like the Jedi were happy, but there was a sense of euphoria, like they had just stopped a galactic-scale war from happening. Yoda of course knew that Mace and Dooku were close, but there was clearly something else bothering one of his most prided peers. Mace looked at the tiny green elder, and explained to him that he had seen something that he shouldn't have. It left him conflicted on many things. While some of this friction obviously revolved around the individuals involved, it also surrounded the actions and the will of the Council. For his own faith had been tested, and perhaps it led to his faulty choice-making when it came to Dooku. Windu would go into great detail about Dooku's demise, and why he acted the way he had. Mace did confirm that he didn't do it out of rage or spite, but out of worry that Dooku's influence could further divide the galaxy in the conflict. Despite his own feelings on his former apprentice being present, Yoda was proud of Mace for making the choice that he did. Truthfully, he did not believe that Windu made it out of spite, nor did he think that Mace acted out of confusion due to what he had seen. Though, without having told Yoda about the conflict that left Mace confused or disoriented, Yoda requested to know what left the highly respected Master of the Order in such a predicament. In all honesty, Mace didn't want to tell Yoda. He in this moment would have preferred to speak to Skywalker about it, but he was on Naboo, doing who knows what with Padme, so that opportunity was kind of out of the way. So, Mace took a deep breath, and revealed what he saw Anakin and Padme profess inside the tunnel to the arena. Mace admitted that in the moment, neither of them knew that they'd be saved, so he did, after reflecting on it, see this as a profession of last rites. They were telling and expressing their truest selves in what was supposed to be their last moments. But Windu also explained that while he completely and wholeheartedly disagreed with their actions, and also understood what it meant for Anakin, he couldn't help but feel frustrated. Anakin acting as such was a failure of the High Council. They shouldn't have let him in, or they should have actively been present in Anakin's training. Both resolutions being something that Mace felt deeply regretful over. He told Yoda that they had fostered an incredibly powerful being, and now with the dark shadow of the Sith lurking over the galaxy, they had made tragic missteps in their actions. Mace adjusted his seating, straightening his back, admitting that his initial thought was to remove Skywalker from the Order, for attachments are forbidden. However, he had to admit that even with Dooku being confirmed a dark sider following his death due to his crimson lightsaber, perhaps there was another course of action, one that wouldn't betray their mandate nor their code. Yoda paused and silently thought, informing Mace, before even finishing his own view, that he would not be given a student now. Yoda was one of the few counselors who believed that Skywalker, upon finishing his training, should receive a student. Ahsoka Tano would have been a great fit, especially being that she was set to finish her trials in the coming week. That would not happen now. Silence then filled the room, as the two Jedi Masters sat in deep thought. Yoda confirmed that the dark side clouded everything, making seeing into the future a difficult task. The shadow of the Clone Wars surrounded everything. Now, they needed to be vigilant in addressing this concern. Few words followed, before Mace suggested that perhaps they do something unorthodox. Being that he didn't agree with the notion of Anakin and Padme being together, perhaps they could ascertain Anakin's loyalty against the Sith. Yoda's ears perked up, encouraging Mace to speak further. He said that in an effort to discourage the desires from Anakin, they should perhaps encourage him to fulfill his Jedi mandate more. Yoda squinted a little, and Mace explained. If the High Council, say, took more of an interest in his learning, perhaps even giving him a more unique treatment, then he could become more abiding of their ways. Yoda felt confused, because this would essentially go against even their own standards for Jedi with attachments. Mace sighed and admitted that every Jedi understood what it felt like to have attachments. Every master had one with their student, and vice versa, and this also continued down every lineage. So if they wanted to stop Anakin from fully completing this attachment to Padme, then kicking him out of the Order would only send him down the dark path. Mace jokingly remarked that if this was 90 years beforehand, maybe they could reasonably remove him from the Order, but not now. The thought or the joke being that peaceful times would bring less chance chaos for them from Anakin. But besides the point, Mace said that the Council as a whole body needed to dedicate time to Skywalker and in instructing him. Because if Mace could be so blunt, it was their responsibility for allowing this to happen. Kenobi was not ready to train Anakin, and that was clear now. That was the burden of the Council. They gave Obi-Wan the ultimatum to train the boy, or Anakin would return to his mother. Now, Qui-Gon's student created a young man who naturally became an outcast, further than Qui-Gon had ever gone within their knowledge during his career. Yoda rubbed his chin and nodded. This was a sound idea. It could keep Anakin and Padme separated longer, bearing that nothing happened during their trip to Naboo. But it could assist Anakin in relinquishing his attachments, so that he could become a better Jedi. Mace did take the responsibility for the failure of the Council, being that he was and is Master of the Order. He then told Yoda that if the Council agreed, then he would be the first to breach Anakin's trust, unless there was a volunteer. Outside of Jedi Council relations, Anakin and Padme were getting married on Naboo, and the Clone Wars came to a complete halt. Without a student to rely on, Sidious was actively trying to find some method of restarting the war. But there was a very big issue standing in his way. Thanks in part to Mace's actions, Jedi Counselor and widely known and respected diplomat Coleman Trebor accompanied Master Kenobi to the Senate. The Republic was in dire need of eyewitness accounts from the battle. Newt Gunray had avoided trial at the hands of the courts for more than a dozen times. The corruption was seeping through the Republic, and the two Jedi present here in these chambers of the Senate were informing the public. Coleman Trebor was the first to speak, being that he was so well known for his antics in saving people from themselves. He spoke with precision before the eyes and ears of the Senate and those who listened in. He addressed the invasion of Geonosis and explained that the Military Creation Act gave the Jedi an army so that they could save 3 captured individuals, one of which being Master Kenobi beside him. He explained that the clones were some of the finest men he had ever met. However, they did not deserve to die in peril for a war that never needed to happen. Coleman went into details about the death of Dooku, the capture of Newt Gunray and Poggle the Lesser, as well as addressing some minor concerns revolving around the event. Following Master Trebor's speech, Obi-Wan would take the stand and begin addressing his own fears of corruption within the Senate. He told them that had they imprisoned Gunray, the Trade Federation wouldn't have attempted to join the CIS. While Kenobi was loosely informed on the movement, he addressed the Confederacy as well within his speech, taking a note from Coleman Trebor's diplomatic skills. Obi-Wan informed both governments that something deeper was at work here. He admitted to seeing figureheads of the Trade Federation, Techno-Union, Commerce Guild, and banking clans talking to Dooku. Kenobi avoided using the term Sith, so he explained that these conglomerates were attempting to take control over the galaxy. His theory was that they were going to use this war between the Republic and Confederacy to make billions or even trillions off of the fear and also the reconstruction to follow the war. The Battle of Geonosis told him one true reality, that those with representation inside of this government also held the doors open for war with the Confederacy. Their massive armies were signed over to Dooku. The banking clans, with a reserve on almost all credits in the galaxy, were siding with the Confederacy. Just imagine what they could accomplish by holding interest rates over the heads of Republic citizens, while also making bank on a war they were invested in. Dooku's death was a clear indication that the Confederacy was misled, because these same powers had too much influence within the Republic. Kenobi then pleaded that the senators listen. If they couldn't listen with their hearts, then at least listen with their pocketbooks. Obi-Wan, knowing that the war dogs of the Senate could profit off the conflict, so he painted a picture of absolute destruction, the type he saw in Geonosis. Their short-term growth and revenue would get slashed after just a day of battle. Imagine what a war could do. Once Obi-Wan stepped away, Coleman wrapped his arm around his shoulder and told him he had done well, priding Kenobi on his ability to hold connection with the room, use wit, and even further, depict a realistic outcome if the Senate continued to chase war. He whispered in his ear that if the war continued, then it would be Palpatine who was the hungry warmonger, not the Separatists. Trebor, despite being one of 2 Jedi to save Palpatine from an assassination attempt a few years prior, was one of the first counselors to oppose Palpatine openly. The Confederacy, on the other side of the galaxy, had their own problems to deal with now. How could they defend their quote-unquote righteous movement if they themselves were not the righteous? If what Master Kenobi said to the Galactic Republic was true, then they were no better than the Republic they stood against. Some of the representatives within the CIS government believed that this was Jedi propaganda, but those few voices were silenced relatively quickly. Without Dooku to preside over their discussions, they had to address 2 major concerns, the first of which being the Jedi and Republic assault at Geonosis, but secondly, if their movement was even viable anymore. The Battle of Geonosis was a big deal, but it would be an even larger problem if the CIS was actually the Republic Part 2, with even more corruption, because at least at the heart of the Republic, there was a constitution, but the Confederacy would literally be built off of corruption, depending on how long Dooku had been in talks with the major conglomerates seen by Obi-Wan on Geonosis. Mina Bontiri of Onderon took the stand, and tried to reason with their peers, because she saw the blood in the water too. If they wanted to fix this, then they needed to figure out the truth and act on it, though Mina's speech was one of desperation. She believed the Confederacy was doomed to fall in on itself. Yet there was something completely unaccounted for, which were Grievous and Asajj Ventress. The two of them were without their leader, and Sidious hadn't yet established a true connection with either of them, because they were meant to see the picture unfold after the beginning of the Clone War. It was supposed to be this cool little dramatic reveal. Whoa, Dooku is so cool, he turned the Republic and the Confederacy against each other, and then the glass shatters, and boom, Sidious is on top of a crawling hologram. It was gonna be so cool until Dooku died. So that was the problem. Asajj was again abandoned, and she felt it within her very soul. Grievous, on the other hand, was angry. He wanted to destroy the Republic and the Jedi, but he also wasn't a general yet. Dooku was going to promote the Kalesh warrior to general and supreme martial commander of the Separatist military following Geonosis and the beginning of the official war, but that didn't happen either. So the droid forces were waiting for any sort of order, one that couldn't come from the two faces that were meant to represent and lead the CIS. The two of them weren't near each other, let alone even met yet, so they had their own individual decisions to make, while faced with the reality that now sat before them both. On Coruscant, after the Council agreed to Mace's proposal, the first Jedi Master, Saesee Tiin, volunteered to instruct Anakin. With so much unfolding in the Senate, and Padme especially, back to working against the Military Creation Act, Anakin was brought under Saesee's wing. A very big piece of this exercise by the Council was to ensure that Anakin was unaware of their planning. More or less, they were testing Skywalker. Aside from this being a cover-up on their own mistakes, Master Oberyn Caesar believed that this could be a remarkable indicator for potential changes within their code. Never before would they have allowed this type of behavior. Such cases could be seen with Eula Braylon. The Council formerly had a member who secretly had a child, and she covered up fallacies of said individual, causing tension within their chambers. Point being, they didn't typically do this. Regardless of that, Oppo saw this as an opportunity to experiment. If, say, an individual like Skywalker could neglect the needs of a few individuals to protect the needs of the many, then it was proof of a code change that could happen. Because realistically, looking at the Jedi Code, it was simple. A Jedi mustn't form attachments, not as a form of torture, but as a method to be unbiased in the protection of others. The Jedi were always challenged to make the sacrifice, if it would save more people than less, and an individual focused on another singular individual could jeopardize hundreds, thousands, or more. It was in this that the High Council found this experiment with Anakin most valuable. He was the most suitable candidate. In the circumstance with Eula Braylon, she was a Jedi and had a child, forming an attachment so deep into her life. Anakin grew up with these attachments, so they should be able to work through him. Skywalker found it especially weird that Saesee Tiin took any interest in him following his knighting ceremony, but he was willing to work with another Jedi Master. While Anakin was doing this, his former instructor was taking on Ahsoka Tano as his second student. Kenobi was always eager, and he was hopeful that Ahsoka would give him an easier time with his instruction. Little did he know what he was getting himself into. Out in Confederate territory, conflict was unfolding. Due to the Techno-Union and Trade Federation being revealed during the Senate hearings, leadership of both companies started to get cold feet. As a result, their ambassadors were sent to collect their fleets and their armies. Long story short, they intersected, believing that the other was trying to pick a fight with them, and thus a droid civil war commenced. The battle droids inside their cruisers clobbered away at each other. Because of news reaching headquarters for both companies, they determined that it was an all-out war. So while Lat Dad and Goom Sam were trying to save face inside the Senate, the companies they represented were tearing away at each other in Confederate territory. No one inside the Senate knew this, and the only people who did know were the Confederacy. So they were deciding if they wanted to bridge a gap with the Republic again, something they would inevitably cave to doing, thanks to Mina Bonteri and her connection to Padme Amidala. The two senators would have a hollow call that would reveal interest from the Confederacy to rejoin the Republic. It wasn't certified, but the truth is, most systems that abandoned the Republic no longer wanted to serve a cause that was sold on false dreams. However, these systems would demand that the Republic change itself before they could unify again. The issue is, they didn't really have bargaining power, due to the fact that they rebelled and seceded in the first place. But there was something that could save them here. It was Padme and her Loyalist Committee that could save all of this. So following a long drawn-out call with Representative Bonteri, Padme would bring together her closest allies and discuss potential bills and routes towards reuniting the Republic. The biggest threat in their way and the largest challenge was Palpatine. The Confederacy wouldn't rejoin if Palpatine remained Chancellor, due to his positions on starting a war to begin with. The Separatists didn't want hostility, and from their perspective, despite the fallacies of Dooku's idealistic approach to revolution, the Jedi and Republic struck first blood by attacking Geonosis. They were the aggressors, and that was leverage within the Senate, the courts, and pretty much everywhere else. Padme and her allies had a lot of work to do. Outside of stuffy political conversations, Anakin and Saesee Tiin were on an adventure. They spent a couple days doing some exercises inside the temple. Master Tiin even showed off some shiny toys from the restricted section. They were getting along great, but they stayed away from talking about attachment. Anakin was a little weirded out by the sudden interest in him. He believed the council knew about his marriage, which wasn't quite the case, but it might as well have been. Anyways, the two Jedi were out searching for the Jedi Killer. In the 2 weeks since Geonosis, there had been 12 Jedi found dead. These were total mutilations, and the council was reacting to them, along with the whole Clone Wars situation, and of course, their Anakin mission. Saesee and Skywalker were being sent to investigate the source of these murders, because they were very odd. Also, no one really wanted Ahsoka and Obi-Wan to go and do that. That was too dangerous. So they arrived at the most recent location of disappeared Jedi, which was just off of Bothan space at Kessel's ugly cousin named Dressel. The two Jedi landed in a smog, using coordinates to locate the last known position of a master and apprentice duo. They had been on Dressel, searching for some naturally growing plants that were said to be more attuned to the Force than anything else in the galaxy. The Jedi were hoping to bring these plants to the temple and essentially encompass their sanctuary in the Force. The Jedi Master had been looking for these mythical plants for decades, and she finally found them before being lost to darkness. Saesee and Anakin eventually, after hours of searching through a dense smog of the planet, found the bodies. Dressel had really odd planetary rotations, leading to coverage like what they were experiencing right here. They only found the bodies because they accidentally walked into them. And as the two Jedi started to examine the nature of death, they found lightsaber marks. All the other bodies had been found with the same type of marks, and the signature, missing lightsaber that accompanied the dead bodies. Though the arrival of Tiin and Skywalker led to something else. The Jedi Killer was on the planet, and he decided to use the fog as a chance to claim more kills against even more Jedi, since the fog was still here when he killed the other two. 4 lightsabers as a result ignited, and darted out of the shadows. Skywalker and Master Tiin reacted, igniting their own weapons and defending themselves. Neither were ready for this, and Anakin hadn't yet been prepared for this type of engagement. The overly powerful droid warrior crushed his weapon down on the unready Jedi, their lightsabers shrieking in the cover that they were hidden within. This fight was entirely based on sight of the saber and trust in the Force. Saesee tried to communicate this, but being that he couldn't tell where Skywalker was anymore, he didn't know if Anakin heard it. He didn't, but it wasn't based on proximity. It was due to the fact that he neglected to listen to what Saesee's advice was. Anakin aggressively assaulted Grievous, who easily beat back his attacks. Master Tiin's skills with the saber were widely respected, but he was no Mace Windu. Saesee's skills against Grievous would have been phenomenal had they been flying, but this was not that. 6 lightsabers and 3 opponents balanced around each other in the fog, barely reacting in time to every strike thrown their way. Despite not having the Force, Grievous had the easiest time. His cybernetics provided the perfect range of reaction for him. Grievous batted Saesee away from young Skywalker, then singled out the young Jedi who was vastly unprepared for the unrelenting assault of 4 lightsabers. Anakin ducked a strike, defending another few and attempting a parry that didn't go in his favor. Master Tin closed his eyes, sensing around him, looking for Skywalker and not finding him. As Anakin started losing his ground, he tried to go on a full assault against Grievous, which did award him some gratification in removing one of Grievous's hands, but he was unable to keep the momentum. Just as Skywalker swung for the droid's neck, he was cut right across the wrist, removing his hand entirely. He wailed in pain, using his other hand to reverse grip his lightsaber, which fell out of his removed limb. He saved his life in this move, but his pain called upon another ally, an unexpected one who'd been trailing Grievous, trying to stop him and hopefully earn herself some belonging. Anakin slipped down to his knees and held Grievous's blades over his head, all 3 metallic limbs bearing down on a reverse-gripped lightsaber until Grievous wheezed in pain, getting kicked in the face and defending himself from 2 red lightsabers. Anakin got to his feet, looking at it, and seeing that there was some sort of Sith present. He wanted to initially kill her, but he realized that whoever this was here to help him. Asajj quickly attacked Grievous, and got aid from Saesee Tiin. The 2 of them cut and swung at the droid, but he was also able to seize control again, by thrusting his claw through Master Tin's stomach, and was able to kill the Jedi Master. Asajj used force to crush Grievous's lungs, killing him in one go, through the dark side. It would be revealed that Asajj had been tracking Grievous, so that she could potentially earn a spot within the Jedi Temple, believing that Mother Talzin would reject her for having joined the Sith. This wasn't exactly the path she wanted to be on, but she was attempting to make amends with the people that had saved her before Dooku found her. It didn't seem right, but it was the most recent sense of belonging she had prior to Dooku. Skywalker would bring Asajj and 3 dead Jedi back to Coruscant and the High Council. They would make the decision to pair Asajj and Anakin up with Opera and Cesis, since they were conducting this experiment, and they'd continue from there. Outside of relations with former asthmatic cyborgs, Padme and the Loyalist Committee planted their foot inside the Senate. They created a bill that would completely destroy Palpatine's career, though their attempts to remove the secret Sith would be in vain. The bill Padme created wasn't the issue. The issue was a Separatist senator who could afford Jango Fett. Throughout the entire reintegration of the Confederacy into the Republic, Palpatine had been a burden. Padme and her colleagues created a bill that would benefit the Republic in the removal of the Trade Federation and Techno Union, seeing that the corruption was pushing the Republic to war. Also, by this point, they knew about the conflict between both groups. The bill would financially rescue the entire government system from caving into a recession. They had all their credits in the banking clans, and these mega conglomerates had too much influence over commerce. So in this package, it would strip these powers of their influence and attempt to rebuild the Republic around more people than individual groups. Though, because Palpatine continued to drag his feet on meeting with the Confederacy delegates, one of their representatives got impatient and hired Jango Fett. What Dooku failed to do to Padme because of plot armor earlier was done to Palpatine. He just didn't have it this time. He would die in a bombing on the landing docks. The Jedi would never learn that he was a Sith, and his death would eventually find blame on the Trade Federation, further influencing the Republic to dismantle them. The blame was shifted to them because Jango used Federation materials to blame Palpatine's death on Gunray and La Dad. Yet, despite the chance for rebuilding the Republic, there was a problem of the clones, and who to pay or what they could be used for. So for the coming months, especially during the reintegration process, they would remain dormant. They'd continue to train, increase their numbers, and wait for orders, but they would never come, forcing the entire Grand Army of the Republic into a police force. The Jedi caught flack for it, and they would have to pay it in labor, due to the clones being created by Sifo Dyas. It was unfair in the minds of the Jedi, but they couldn't really do anything about it. The next couple of years, during the time that the Clone Wars were supposed to happen, the Republic would restructure itself around the systems that made the government strong. The banking clans, Commerce Guild, Trade Federation, Techno Union, and so forth were out. Their power was taken from them, and they were dismantled for having a monopoly over certain sectors in the galaxy. The clone army was redirected from police force to military use, so that they could move into the Outer Rim and unknown regions. Sadly, this meant that the clones went from being recognized as a force in the galaxy to essentially slave labor. They were fighting useless wars with scum, when they really didn't need to die for anything. But despite Padme and numerous other senators trying to get the clones to have their rights, it was in reality a choice between a united republic or clone rights. Sadly for the clones, they'd be deemed expendable for the rest of their lives. The last clone batches would finish up what the Gen 1 clones couldn't, and they would have their little celebration before being forgotten. On a semi-positive note, they wouldn't be forced into poverty. They would still have fairly fair lives. Inside the Jedi Order, the Council completed their experiment with Skywalker, and they decided on removing him from the Jedi Order. They respected him, and he did try his best while learning from the counselors, but the test was conclusive. He couldn't relinquish his emotions. So by 17 BBY, he'd be a regular citizen again. But he wouldn't be encouraged to act on darkness. His removal from the Jedi had him unfazed. He honestly didn't care that much. He and Asajj were like siblings, big sister, little brother, so they would remain in touch. Obi-Wan and Anakin would always be close, and those he made friends with on the Council would always be considered wise teachers to Anakin. But at this moment, he had no need to continue serving the Order anyways. Instead, he'd find his own job. It would start with garage work before becoming a bookie at a local casino. He actually loved it, because he could pay attention to pod racing. That's the only reason he took it, actually. Skywalker and the Jedi had no bad blood. He just wasn't fit for them. Asajj was proof of that, because aside from her closeness with Anakin, she released her attachments with relative ease, and let go of the darkness. Padme and Anakin wouldn't have any children until their late 20s. The first two would be girls, Leia and Sabse, the youngest being a boy named Luke. Asajj and Obi-Wan would be supporting of Anakin as he started his family life, but they would both remain Jedi. Without the Order being involved in the war on the unknown regions and the Outer Rim, the public view of the Jedi didn't shift. Realistically, the Republic became more independent and self-run. Padme's tenure within the Senate would see her becoming Chancellor, and assisting with the economic growth that followed the capture of new planets and expansion. When she retired after her second term as Chancellor, she and her family would be able to enjoy the beginning of the new golden age of Republic governing. And that, my friends, is our story. And special thanks to all the patrons: Brandon Wells, Ozpin, Angel Dust, Alexandra Reese the Beginning and End, Jack Silver, Prismatic Warlock Master, Lyndall Asher, Smoobs, There Are Cars, Darth Vitiate, Seju Jagger, Groot 36, Hunter Belden, Rosebird, General Alexander, Robin Roberts, Blackie Chan, Django Fat Clone, Nick 5098, Ben Ingram, The Big Red Pyramark, Diamond Constant, Darth Nemesis, Lord Tibbs, CC2024, Galvin Gaming, Tristan, Mandalore, Sir William 1767, Darth Revan, Granddaddy Bane, Laliant, Sky Guy, Penguin, Cullen Rooney, Shark Midori, RJ38, Nick, Michael Erlanger, The Last Jedi, Apollo Weewo 670, Annika Stink Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Knox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tem, Johnny DeGuin, Sansa Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Calic, Youngling Slayer 66, Man Meta Studios, Anakin 003, Lord Draken, Ford's Legacy Star Wars, Erebus, Rex the Wolf, The Man of Three First Names, Darkseid 46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing. For supporting the channel, smash that like button. Let's talk about this story. So that thumbnail is hilarious. I don't know, I like the funny thumbnails, I think they're funny. I really wanted this story to be kind of jarring. I initially came into this like, oh, the Jedi should get rid of Anakin. And then I killed Dooku, and I was like, maybe not. I think there's a couple ways to look at this. I think Mace Windu would genuinely be frustrated. I think he'd be like, this just, you should be doing this, da 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 da. But at the same time, I also do believe that because of the way the Clone Wars start off in this scenario, and even in a regular scenario, if Dooku didn't die, I don't think he'd want to get rid of him. I think he'd be like, okay, this is a problem. The Sith are here. We need to do something about that and this. I think this story more or less shows the Jedi are stuck to their ways, and also shows that Anakin is stuck to his own, and I think that's okay. Both sides kind of just work naturally. This is Anakin fully completing his arc without turning to the dark side. He gets to continue being himself, have his love life, and at the same time, the galaxy around him shifts. You know, the biggest enemy to the people, aside from Palpatine, is General Grievous. And so that's Anakin's biggest threat in the story. So I hope you all enjoyed this story. Little fun, couple funny parts, but I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.